Okay. All right, John, go for it.
All right, thank you so much. Well, welcome everyone to the Oklahoma Tax Commission's Gross Production Registration Training. A little background about me is my name is John Cottengim. I've been with the state for 18 years now. I graduated from the University of Oklahoma in 2005 with a degree of economics and started my career at the Tax Commission, and I've been working in gross production the whole time. We've moved up over the years, and now I'm the manager over the section. So I'm taking this opportunity to give you all a little guide on how to register for the various types of gross production activities. So today we're going to cover a couple of things. We're going to talk about how to access OKTAP, which is the Oklahoma Taxpayer Access Point. This is where you're going to do the majority of your tax work for not only gross production, but virtually any interactions with the Oklahoma Tax Commission. We'll talk about how to register as an operator, or as we're using the term now more as producer. For those of you that are reclaimers and saltwater disposal operators, we'll cover how to register for a license for those. And for those with as transporters, we'll cover how to register for a transporter license. We'll then go over an overview of what it looks like when you actually log into your OKTAP account, some of the functionalities that are available there to you. We'll cover how to request a new production unit number on a new lease you may have drilled, or how to update and change existing information about a lease that you currently have. Then we'll talk about the public PUN lookup, where you can get information about any of the PUNs that we have on our records. And then we'll also talk about how you can go about requesting production history in a general format or a more confidential format, where you can get the actual tax information and everything. So for those of you who are not aware, OKTAP is accessible from the Oklahoma Tax Commission homepage. You can get there by just going to www.tax.ok.gov. And as you'll see right here, there's a little section that says OKTAP. That little link that says visit OKTAP. If you click on it, it'll bring you to a new page, and this is our basic OKTAP homepage. It's got some useful information, such as a spot where you can do some basic stuff without having to log in, such as make a payment, maybe like on your income tax or a penalty or assessment, submit documentations to your account without having to log in, or request and control the powers of attorney that you've authorized people to use with the Oklahoma Tax Commission. For individuals, it has options about like, where's my refund? How do I file for disabled veterans, exemptions, etc. And then where we're going to spend most of our time right now is focused on business, where you can register for a regular business. We're going to spend our time right here where it says register for gross production, but you can also do special events, coin operation decals, import verification numbers, or special fuel decals, etc. So first, let's talk about registering as a new operator, or as the term that we're more commonly using now is producer, in case you hear our registration group talk about that. So to access that is you'll come to the OKTAP homepage, and you'll click the second link under businesses, which is register for gross production. When you do that, you'll be brought to a new page where it's going to ask you for what type of customer you are. Are you a sole proprietor, a single member LLC, or a business? For our example today, we're just going to be registering as a regular business. So we'll select that toggle tag. And as you see, once we do that, it opens up another page where it asks for identification information. It's going to ask for your federal employee ID, and it's going to ask you to confirm that, and then provide your 5-digit company number, which is assigned by the Oklahoma Corporation Commission. In this example, you notice there's this little red exclamation point. That means it has checked that federal ID and has indicated, hey, we don't think that's valid. So it's going to check against what's been registered with the Oklahoma Tax Commission. Since this is just a demonstration, it'll go ahead and let us accept that. Next, it's going to ask you, why are you filling out this application? It's going to ask you if you want to open a gross production tax account, a reclaimer license account, which will also apply to saltwater disposal units, a transporter license, or the rare refiner's license. So for our first example, we're going to do gross production tax. You'll notice that when we select that toggle, another box pops up, and that's for home use. And that is for filers who have a lease that's basically attached to their house. They're using gas from the well itself to power like their own home heat and energy. For most of you, you're going to be able to leave that untoggled because you're going to be filing as a business. So in this example, we'll leave it untoggled. Once we've done that, we'll click the next button, and it'll bring us to the next stage of our application process. Here, it's going to ask you for some basic contact information. It's going to ask you for what type of contact are you providing, the name of that contact, their email address, and a business phone. And then if they happen to have it, a business fax. I know some of us aren't using faxes really as much anymore. So for our example, our contact type we listed is a business contact. We're in the United States, and we just used our name as John Taxpayer, and our email is just taxpayer@tax.ok.gov. Then we have a temporary phone and business number that we've used for our example. Next, you'll scroll down on the page, and it's going to ask you for some additional information. It's going to ask you for what type of ownership this business is, what your Secretary of State number is, which will check against the Secretary of State's website to make sure you're in good standing, and the business's actual name. So when we fill out that information, we're going to put in this case that we're a corporation commission. Since we're using a test system, we're just using generic numbers for 1 through 9, and we're calling our business the Oklahoma Tax Commission GP team. Next, you'll notice down here, there's another red exclamation point where it's going to ask for an owner and officer for the account. One must be provided. So we'll click on that link right there. And that's going to bring us to this new menu. This new menu looks very bare bones, I know, but you'll see we've got a few spots on here where we can click add a record up here and up here. And when we do that, it opens up an additional field where we can provide identifying information. So it's going to ask you for an ID type, whether that's a social security number, a taxpayer identification number, or whatnot, and that number itself. It's going to ask you for your title as the officer. It doesn't have any fancy titles. It's pretty bare bones. So it's things like president, chief financial officer, vice president. So if you're like a company that has a fancy title, like a beer and pizza manager, that's not going to be on there, unfortunately. The date they took that role, and if they've ceased, you can add the cease date. I'll ask them for their first name and their family name. Middle name is not required. When we fill out that information number again, we just selected Social Security type, Social Security number in our filing. We're using our number. For our title as president, the commence date we decided in this case was August 1st, 2023, and we're just John Q. Taxpayer. Now you'll notice we have a scroll bar over here. So as we scroll down, it's going to ask for our address information too, in case the tax commission needs to get in contact with that person and send them a direct letter physically. So it's going to ask you for the street, city, state, zip code, and county. So in this case, we're just using the Oklahoma Tax Commission's current address, which is 123 Robert S. Kerr, Oklahoma City, Oklahoma, zip code 73102 in the USA. Then we click OK, or if we wanted to add another officer, we would just click add another record. When we do that, we'll be brought back to our previous screen, but you'll notice that little red error flag has been removed. And now we can click next and proceed on to the next stage.
No, I'm on. Yeah.
So the next thing it's going to ask for is what is the mailing address for information you want to receive from the tax commission. It's going to ask you again for that basic information, such as the street, if you have an apartment, business suite, that unit number, the city, the state, the zip, and the county. So we enter that information. And again, we're using the Oklahoma Tax Commissions, but you'll notice this time is the zip code. I just put all 9s. Well, you'll notice there's a button here that says click to verify, and you're going to have to verify your address against the United States Postal Service records. So when we click that, it's going to pop up a message and say, hey, this is how you entered your address, but we think the only 2 verified addresses are these 2. So please select one of these 2. And that way, if you made a small typo or something like that, it's easy to catch and correct. So we're going to select our correct address, and you'll notice that it automatically updated the zip code to the one we selected. The verified now has this green checkbox next to it, meaning the address is good. Next, it's going to ask us for the physical location of the business, just in case your business is separated out and the physical address is different from the mailing address. You can enter that. For our example, we're just going to click yes on this portion right here, where it asks us if we want to use the same address as our mailing address. Once we do that, it populates the information. We click to verify, and since it's using the information for above, it doesn't bring us that extra menu. It just verifies it because it recognizes that as a good address now. Then we just come down here and we click next, and that'll bring us to the bond page. So in Oklahoma, if you're registering as a producer, but you're also going to be purchasing or selling your own oil and gas, you would have to get bonded. The bond requirement is 3 months of your estimated tax liability. In this case, since we're just registering as a producer, we're just going to use the toggle switch to select producer. Producers don't require any bond information, so there's no errors or anything like that. So we can just click next and move on to the next stage. The next stage is going to ask us to create our own web logon. That way you can actually go into OKTAP and do things like file monthly production reports, make amendments to PUNs, change PUNs, file claims for refund, etc. So it's going to populate with that some of the information you entered earlier, which in our case is John Taxpayer, which is taxpayer tax OK11, that business phone based on that contact. It's going to ask you for a username, a password, ask you to confirm that password. The password does have some stringent requirements. And if you're like me, after about the 6th month, you forget and you have to change it and you have to change it again. And it's going to ask you for some security information. When you enter your username, it will check that username against all the usernames currently in the system. So if you have one that's already being used, it won't allow you and you'll have to select a different one. Again, it'll just do that password verification. It's going to ask you to verify who the phone carrier is for your business, the country that phone is located in, and then for your security information. In my case, I picked what's your favorite animal, but I can't tell you my secret information or my IT people will get very angry at me. Next, it'll bring you to a signature page with this kind of scary looking statement, but this is something that you'll encounter on pretty much any request. This page simply states that I, the undersigned applicant or authorized representative, or if a corporation, a responsible corporate officer for the reporting and remitting of taxes, declare under the penalties of perjury that I have examined this application and any attachments, and to the best of my knowledge, the facts set forth are true and correct, and that the requirements hereunder will be carried out in accordance with the laws of the state of Oklahoma and the rules and regulations of the Oklahoma Tax Commission. It further says, I acknowledge and agree that sales, withholding, and motor fuel taxes are considered trust fund taxes for the state of Oklahoma, and that any use of those trust funds for other than the timely remittance to the state of Oklahoma could be considered embezzlement and result in criminal prosecution. And then it's going to ask for an electronic signature. To do that, you just enter your first and last name. The date of your signature will be populated, and then you hit this little toggle switch to essentially say, yes, I am signing it. You press the submit button, and then you'll be taken to our next page where you'll get our confirmation. This is a very important page to write down. They'll give you an option to print this for your records. They'll tell you that you have successfully registered, and thank you for doing so. They'll give you the date of the application and then this confirmation number. Please write down this confirmation number, as it is the fastest way for my team to assist you when looking up a request you may have. As it mentions right here, it will let you know that please don't attempt to make any filing of taxes until you've received an account number and further instructions from the Gross Production Registration Group. Now, while it does say that processing the application can take up to 5 to 10 business days if the information provided is sufficient, our registration group's a little bit quicker and usually can have you taken care of within 1 to 3 days at most. If we do need further information from you, though, maybe you didn't include a copy of an exemption registration, or maybe there was some issue with the account, then we'll reach out to you, and that could delay the processing. But at the end of the process, we will send you an email with an attachment containing your account number upon approval of the application. If you haven't received an email or any kind of communication from us within 10 business days, I would probably say within just the week itself, then please contact us at 405-521-3160 and use that confirmation number so we can look up the account and the request and see what's going on. Once you do that and you hit OK, your submission is done, and it's now on the Oklahoma Tax Commission's job to process the request. Now, let's talk about registration as a reclaimer. This process is going to be very similar. It's going to look a little repetitive, but then that's intentional because the point of this is that you'll be able to use this presentation as kind of a step-by-step guide for future references. So again, we'll be on the OKTAP homepage. We'll come to this section under businesses where it says register for gross production. When we do that, we'll select our customer type. Again, we're going to select the business in this case. And again, it does check that FEIN. And then when we ask why we're filling out this application, this time we're going to select reclaimer's license as opposed to gross production tax. However, if you wanted to do both gross production and reclaimer at once, you could toggle both switches and it would take you through both processes. When we toggle the reclaimer, it's now going to ask us if we're filing for multiple reclaimer licenses or just one. That's because each reclaiming plant and saltwater disposal facility has to have its own independent license, but will allow you to register multiple at one time just to help simplify the process. In this case, we're just going to register one location, so we're not going to hit that toggle button and we'll just hit next. Once we do so, we're going to be brought to that page where it's asked us for our general contact information about who is making the request. I don't know why my lights just went off. And again, we're selecting business. Our name is just John Taxpayer, our email, our business phone, and fax if you happen to still have one. Again, when we scroll down, it's going to ask for the business information. Again, an officer or owner is required. So when we click on that, it will bring us to that page where we can enter that officer information, including their ID type, the ID number, their title, the commence date, their first, last name. Again, you will have to scroll down, enter their street address of where they're located, and then click OK. Once at least one officer or owner has been entered, it clears that flag and will allow you to proceed on to the request. Next, it's going to ask you about the mailing address of the business. So again, we just enter the address of the business. And again, if we put something wrong, when we click to verify, it'll bring up that little pop-up menu where we can select the correct address. When we select the correct address, it fills in that information for us. If we need to select a different physical location, we can provide a different address. But for our example, again, we're just going to use the same as our mailing address. When we verify, it's already verified because it used the correct information from above. Then when we click next, it's going to ask us for the reclaimer of what type of facility are we filing for. It's going to ask us if we're filing for a saltwater disposal well or a reclaiming plant, and then it's going to ask us for some information about the facility. So you'll notice in the facility, it's going to want the legal description of the facility, what the plant or well name is, and the county it's located in. The way this is structured for the legal description is you can fill out to 4 quarters, but if the previous quarter is not filled out, then the next one's not open. So until you fill out quarter 1, you can't fill out quarter 2, etc. And then it's also going to ask for the section, township, and range. In our example, we just identified this as a reclaiming plant for all of quarter 1, section 5, township 06 south, range 07 east. In this case, the plan's just the OTC reclaimer, the county's Oklahoma. But when we scroll down, we'll see it's going to ask us for some storage tank size and quantity about information about the plant. That tank size is in gallons for reference. So for this fictional case, we decided we've got 4 10,000 gallon tanks, 2 500 gallon tanks, a 5-gallon gas jug somewhere, and that's the only thing. Once you enter all those, you click next, and it'll bring you to the bond information. Since we did select reclaimer, you're going to notice that it has this little error message saying that, hey, reclaiming plants require at least $10,000 in bonds. So that is the difference between a reclaimer and a saltwater. Is the reclaimer bond is required is $10,000 or 3 months tax liability per facility, whichever is greater. If you're a company that has 5 or more reclaiming license, then the total bond you must post is $50,000 or 3 months tax liability, whichever is greater. If you had 10 reclaiming plants, then the bond cap would still just be $50,000 or 3 months tax liability. So that caps out at the 5 or more. In the case of saltwater disposal wells, the bond is actually $2,500 or 3 months liability per well. And if you have 5 or more saltwater disposal facilities, then the bond minimum is $10,000 or 3 months tax liability, whichever is greater. So in this case, we're going to hit our little tab to indicate that we are putting in a reclaimer only bond. And our bondholder today is the people of OK. Our bond receipt number, which you'll have. The bond amount, in this case, we put $10,000. The bond type, the reclaiming plant, the sort of type, principal type, if it's a certificate of deposit, maybe it's an insurance or a CD, anything like that. And the start date that bond becomes effective. Then we hit next. Again, we're brought to the web logon screen where it's going to ask us to create that username and password if we don't already have one. And again, in this case, we just selected taxpayer 1, our password and our confirmation number. That password does have some stringent requirements, so please review it. It'll ask you for a security question in case you need to unlock your account or make changes or fix it. And then once you enter that information, just click next. Again, you'll be brought to that signature page where it has the scary language where it says, hey, I am a representative and a responsible person, that I am doing this under the penalty of perjury, that everything we've submitted we believe is true and correct as we've set forth, and that if this is a trust fund tax, that anything that we use those funds for other than timely remittance to the state could be considered embezzlement and result in prosecution. Unlike our previous screen, you'll notice this time it has a area where it says, please select payment method, ACH payment or credit card. That is because reclaimer licenses, saltwater disposal licenses, and transporter licenses all do have a $150 application fee per license. So that's why it's going to ask for payment, and it's going to require that payment before it accepts the application. Once we do that, it's going to bring us to kind of a receipt in case we'd filed for multiple things. Since we didn't file a transporter license, you'll notice the amount is $0. We don't have any cab cards because that applies to transporter license, so that's also $0. And we only had one reclaimer license, which was $150. So its total is $150. Ask us to schedule that payment. And when it does so, it'll bring us to where we enter our banking information. It'll ask us for the bank type. You can choose checking or savings. Ask for the name on the account, the routing number, the account number, confirmation of the account number, the payment date, and you can set that date to a future payment date. So let's say you submit your application on the 14th, but you didn't want to pay until the 20th. You could set that to the 20th. It's going to show the amount that we show the payment is, and it's going to ask you to confirm that you agree with that amount. Once we enter that information, you'll see we have the routing number. It'll confirm the name of the bank that is associated to that routing number, the account number. It'll show as verified. If it did not agree, you'd get one of those little exclamation points saying, hey, there's a problem. We're going to go ahead and submit it for the current date, and we're going to make the payment for $150. We then click submit, and it brings us to a final confirmation screen where it says, I hereby authorize the Oklahoma Tax Commission to debit my bank account in the amount of $150. You are required to re-enter your email to confirm this submission, as your email will act as your electronic signature. So you'll enter your email and you'll confirm it. So in this case, if we just did taxpayer@tax.ok.gov and we confirm it, and then we click OK. When we click OK, we're again brought to that confirmation screen. And again, it's going to provide us that general information where, hey, we can print this. It's going to tell us thanks for registering electronically. It's going to give us the date of the application, that confirmation number. And again, you want to keep hold of that confirmation number, as if you have any questions or our group reaches out to you, it's going to be the easiest way for us to look up the application and be able to answer your question. Again, it's going to remind you, please don't attempt to file taxes until you've actually received your account number and filing instructions from our registration group. And just a reminder that it could take up 5 to 10 days to process the application if the information is sufficient. But if you haven't heard anything from us within a week or up to 10 days, please go ahead and reach out to the Oklahoma Tax Commission directly with your confirmation number so we can figure out what's going on with your request. Once you do that, you're set up as a reclaimer and you're good to go. Now we're going to talk about transporters. And this process is very similar to our last two. First, we're going to start on that Oklahoma Tax Commission Access Portal homepage, and we're going to select Register for Gross Production. When we do so, again, we're going to select our customer type. It's going to do the validations of the identification information, and then we can move forward. In this case, we're going to now select Transporter License. However, you'll notice this time when we hit the toggle switch, there are no additional options because there's nothing really to differentiate. There's only one transporter license per company. Doesn't matter if you have one vehicle or a million, you only need one transporter license. So you'll click next. Again, you'll be brought to that page where it's going to ask you for that contact information. So again, we'll just enter our business, our name, our email, our business phone, and fax. Again, it's going to ask for what type of ownership is related to the business, Secretary of State number, and what our business name is. And again, we do have to provide at least one owner or officer. Doing so again, we just add a record, we fill out the appropriate information. And once we do so, we click next, we're brought back to our previous page where we can go hit next, and it's going to ask us about the mailing address again for the location that we want our correspondence. Again, it's going to ask us to verify the address we entered. So even though we entered all 9s, we would get that little pop-up screen that said, hey, here are the 2 addresses the United States Post Office says is valid. We select the valid one and it corrects the address. And then again, we can set our physical location to a different address if we need to, but in our case, we're just going to go ahead and use the same example. It's verified, so we can click next. For transporters, that brings us to where it's going to ask us for cab cards, and at least 1 cab card is required. So the cab card is a decal that you will keep inside the vehicle that's transporting crude oil. Every vehicle that you use to transport crude oil is going to be required to have a cab card. Without that cab card, there is the possibility that the vehicle gets stopped, that its shipment could be seized, as it could be considered as suspected theft, since it is not an authorized transporter for the Oklahoma Tax Commission. Every transporter license comes free with 1 cab card, and to enter that, you just enter the information right here below. In this case, we're going to say our make is an OTC Cruiser. The unit number is whatever your company uses to designate your vehicle units. It's going to ask us for the model year and the vehicle identification number. It does validate this VIN against the Department of Transportation to make sure it is valid. I've had at least 1 case in my history so far where an individual encountered an error with their VIN, and the reason was because that specific VIN tied to that vehicle was not authorized for use by the Department of Transportation in the United States as a whole, and so we could not register that vehicle. And then it's going to ask you for what the capacity of that vehicle is, and it's going to ask you if that's in gallons or barrels. If you have another one, you just continue to type the information, and then we've also updated this on our website so you can actually import it if you have a lot via an Excel file. Once you enter the cab card information, it's going to ask you for your bond information. A bond is required for transporters, and that bonding requirement is $1,000. It's going to ask you for the bond holder, the bond receipt, the amount, the type, is it a surety, CD, etc., and when that start date happens. Next, it's going to ask you again for that web logon information for you to create your account, including your username, the stringent password, your phone, who's the carrier, its country of origin, and then your security question in case we need to do something with your account. Again, like the reclaimer license and saltwater disposal license, there is a fee tied to the transporter license application. So once you've gone through and accepted the scary paragraph up here, you're going to be asked to submit a payment for the application. And again, we're going to be brought to that kind of receipt screen where it says, hey, this is what you're paying for. Now you'll notice it says transporter license, $150. And additional cab card fee is $0. That's because we only entered a single vehicle. That first cab card is free. If we had a second vehicle we entered, this additional cab card fee would show $5. If we had had 101 vehicles, then the additional cab card fee would have been $500 because that first cab card is free. A common mistake we see people do is they submit the transporter license and then an extra $5 to us, even though they only have 1 vehicle. So just please double check that. Since we're not filing for a reclaimer license, there's no fee associated to that. So our total payment due today is only $150, where we can schedule our ACH payment. Again, it's going to ask us for our banking account information, where we can enter if it's a checking or savings, the name on the account, the routing number. It'll tell you the bank that's associated to, so you can make sure you have the correct bank. And then it's going to ask you to enter your account number and reconfirm it. It's going to ask you for the date of the payment. Again, you can set that to a future date if you wish. It's going to show you the total amount that we have calculated. It's going to ask you to confirm that amount with your submission. When doing so, it's going to ask you again to confirm it, this time by saying, I authorize the Oklahoma Tax Commission to debit my bank account the amount of $150 in this case, but it would be whatever your total is. And that you're entering your email and re-entering your email to act as your electronic signature. Click OK. And again, we're brought to that confirmation screen where it's going to say, thanks for registering with us. Here's your application date. Here's the confirmation number that you want to use and reference in case you have any inquiries about your application. And just a reminder that typically it's supposed to take 5 to 10 business days before we can get your application processed if the information is sufficient. If we need additional information, we'll reach out to you. If we haven't reached out to you or you haven't heard from us by 10 business days, please go ahead and contact us directly at this number, 405-521-3160. And make sure you have that confirmation number handy so we can look up the request and see what's going on with it. Once you do that, you're registered as a transporter for crude oil and you're good to go. So let's talk about the OKTAP login. This is where you can log in to see your account based on that account information you created earlier. That information is going to be entered up here in the upper right corner. We're going to enter that username we selected, that password we selected, and we're going to hit login. If, let's say, you're a company that already has a business account, so you just need to create an account, you don't need to go through the registration process. You can just hit create account and it'll let you set up a request for your already existing business. When you log in for the first time, it's going to ask you to set up two-step verification. That is a requirement for our security purposes and with our agreement with the IRS. And the options you have for that is to receive your second step verification either by text message or email. In this case, we're going to go ahead and choose email. When we click on add email, it's going to bring up another box where it's going to say, hey, we're going to send a security code when trying to log in. And it's going to come from this address at no reply at oktax.state.ok.us. Make sure it's on your whitelist because there's always a chance it could end up in your junk folder. And then it's going to ask you for what email address you would like to use for that two-step verification. In this case, we're just using our generic email address of taxpayer@tax.ok.gov. We click save. And at that point, it's going to say, hey, we sent an email to that address you just entered. And if you don't see the message, check your junk or spam folders in case it got picked up by that. And then it's going to ask you to enter the security code that was provided. If you didn't receive the security code, you can always ask it to resend a new one. Once we enter that code, we click confirm, and then it's going to come to an option where it's going to ask us about your mailing preferences. The Oklahoma Tax Commission has been on a mission to try to reduce the amount of paper we send. So we're asking people to opt in for paperless correspondence. By clicking opt-in, you're saying that I consent to receive OKTAP correspondence electronically and no longer will receive hard copies in the mail. Documents will be accessible as PDF files and can be saved or printed at your own discretion. OKTAP correspondence notifications will be issued to the primary email address of all web profiles with mail notification enabled. So you'll have like a master account holder, you'll have sub account holders, and then you can have third-party account holders in case you use a third-party accounting firm. So the email will go to the primary email address associated with the account as a whole. Consenting to the electronic OKTAP correspondence with the OTC remains in effect until you withdraw your consent. You may withdraw your consent at any times by logging into your OKTAP account and manually requesting review, or you can email or contact us directly and we can make that change for you on the back end. If you do not wish to participate in paperless correspondence with the OTC, then just leave this unchecked and click the next box, and that's perfectly fine. Please note that even if you do opt for paperless mailing, statutory required letters and communications will still have a hard copy mailed to the taxpayer. So for example, if we deny an application while you would receive an electronic version of that copy, you would still receive the physical hard copy as well, as we are statutorily obliged to send that. Once your preference is set, it'll come to let you know that it's been set. You can click submit. It'll bring you to the confirmation number screen with the number, but it doesn't have all the additional information because it's instantaneous. But if there is an issue with setting it up, you can always reference that confirmation number when you contact us. Once you do that, after your initial login, you'll get to what is the main screen that you see when you log into OKTAP, which is just kind of a summary of all the accounts that you have. So in this case, we've set up a gross production account, a reclaimer account, and a transporter account. You'll notice these both have a balance of $150. That's because the payment was submitted the same day as the application, so we haven't had a chance to apply it yet. Now, here on the gross production account, you can do things like file the 341 return, which is the monthly production report. You can look at additional gross production requests, which we'll cover in a little bit more detail. You can view the production periods you have on file and what their balances do, and you can make a payment. For reclaimer and transporters, it's got the options to submit the Form 323A application, which is just the monthly record of oil transported and stored. You can view or file those returns and make a payment. And then for transporters, it has the similar options, but it also has the ability where you can add additional vehicles to your existing license in case you've acquired a new vehicle throughout the year and you need to get it a cab card. So also you'll notice we have this area like the Action Center, and it has a little one, as you would have seen on our previous screen. That means there's a message there, not necessarily that you need to do something, but it's just a reminder. So for gross production accounts, you'll get a reminder every month that, hey, you have a monthly report that's due. If you're just a producer and your purchaser handles your monthly filings and remittance, you will still see these messages. And we haven't worked out how to differentiate those accounts yet, but you can safely close them and ignore them. They're not mandatory to be addressed. They're just a reminder to help you stay on top of things. Then if we look like under the More tab, we can see we have far more additional options, such as if we need to do W-2 filings for our accounts, we can. We can request earnings and withholdings. We can search our past submissions for any of our account types. We can view messages that we have received from the Oklahoma Tax Commission, letters that you've received from the agency. You can manage the returns you've submitted. You can update names and addresses. And then you can view access and manage access. If you're the master account holder, you can set up access for third-party taxpayers or representatives, et cetera, for you. So let's say you've gotten set up as your GP account, and now you're like, I need to register my new well that I just got. Well, you'll log into your OKTAP account, so it'll look like this. We'll go under that gross production request that we said we would talk about a little bit earlier. And when you click on that, you'll be brought to this screen where there's a far set of more options, such as requesting a reduction in your bond. If you had a refund claim, you can look up the claim detail, file for incentive refund claims, make non-incentive refund claims, filing history, which we'll cover in detail a little bit later, filing a mass change of operators, register Form 340, register or change PUN, which is the option we're going to select, or you can request a merge number in case your leases have gone under a plan of unitization. So when we click on the Form 340, register or change PUN, that'll bring us to a step-by-step page where we can go about our process. First, it's going to ask you if you're a producer, because only producers can file for new PUNs or make changes to existing one. In this case, we're going to click yes and indicate that we're filing for a new PUN. And then we click next. This will bring us to the producer information stage. It's going to load this information based on the account you filed. It's going to ask you to go ahead and re-verify that address. And if you need to update your address at this point, you can insert a new address and use this checkbox right here to identify it. And then again, you're going to have to verify it with the post office. Then it's going to ask us to enter our business telephone and the email address associated with it. Once we've completed all that information and everything is verified, we can click on next. And that'll bring us to the PUN registration, where it's going to ask us for some general well information. It's going to ask us for the lease name, the well name and number, the first production date, the county it's associated to. If the lease happens to split across two counties, you can enter the second county, and then it's going to ask you for the percentages that that lease is participating in for each county. In our case, we're just going to call this lease the OTC new lease. It's the well number is the oil well 1. Our first production date was July 1, 2023. It's occurring in Adair County, and it's 100% applied there. We click next, and now it's going to ask us for the legal description. And you're going to notice there's an error here on total acreage. However, if you try to type in the total acreage, it won't let you. That's because the total acreage is automatically calculated based upon the legal description you enter below. So when the legal description, it's going to ask you for up to 4 quarters. And again, you can't fill in the lower quarter until the previous quarter has been filled in. So in this case, we have the southeast quarter 2, the eastern half of quarter 1, section 5, township 6 north, range 07 east. If we had a horizontal hole, we could add the option to add the surface hole descriptor and the bottom hole descriptor if we wanted to. But you'll notice that once we enter that information, it calculated the total acreage to be 80 acres. We click next, and now it's going to ask us for some additional well information. It's going to first ask us for the API. The API is required for all new wells. It's going to ask us for the well classification if it's oil or gas, and that's going to be based upon the Corporation Commission's determination. It's going to ask if the well we're registering is joining a unit as part of an existing one, if not. It's going to ask us if we have any non-taxable exemptions, and it's going to ask us for the registered purchasers. First, we're going to start with the API, which we just click on that little hyperlink right there. It brings up a very bare bones kind of menu where it just looks blank. And all you have to do is just start typing in right here, and you can enter your API. Once you enter your API, click OK. And it'll bring you to the next part. Again, we're going to select no, and now we're going to enter an exempt code. Now, exempt codes work a little tricky, as in it's going to ask you for the exempt code number, and it's going to give you all the available non-taxable royalty interests. So we have the State School Land Commission, we have the state of Oklahoma itself, federal ownership, county, cities, school districts, and then any of the tribes. Then it's going to ask you for what product code does that exemption apply to. So if that exemption only applies to oil, you would select oil. If it only applied to gas, you'd select gas. And if it applied only to liquids, you would select liquids. If it applied to all product codes, you would leave this field blank. I know that's counterintuitive. We'll have another example of it, but that's the way it's set up. Is the product code field is left blank, then it'll apply to all product codes. When you file your monthly reports, the system will actually automatically bring in these exempt interest and calculate how much of your production is exempt for you. And then it's going to ask you for the decimal equivalent. In this case, we're saying it's got a 25% exemption on oil. So we put it in as 0.25. And it's going to ask us the date that exemption started. In this case, the same date as our first production, which is July 1, 2023. We click OK. It brings us back to this menu where it's going to ask us to then enter registered purchasers. When you click on the purchasers, it's going to give you a drop-down menu. This menu is a little outdated. We have reduced some of the options, but it's going to ask you for what type of product, who's remitting it, their name, and who's the remitter. Currently, you're actually only going to see crude oil because condensate has been rolled into product code 1. And you're going to notice that casing head gas is now missing as it's been rolled into product code 5. Natural gas liquids still exist, and minerals have been removed. When you enter the purchaser number, it's going to auto-populate the purchaser's name for you, and it's going to ask you who's actually remitting the taxes. The purchaser, who is normally the one required by statute, or if you've asked for an exception to remit the taxes yourself as the producer, you can enter your own number, and it's going to ask you the date of first sales that occurred. Once you enter that, it'll bring you back to this menu in case you need to update any of this additional information. You click next, and that'll bring us to the confirmation or the signature page where again we have our scary little statement that says, hey, I promise everything I'm submitting is true and correct to the best of my knowledge. I understand trust fund taxes are only to be used for remittance to the state of Oklahoma. You provide your first and last name, your date, and you hit submit. And once you do so, you're given your confirmation number. Most PUN requests will process automatically. However, in the event you don't hear from us within 2 to 3 days, I would say go ahead and reach out and contact us, provide that confirmation number because there may be an issue with the registration. Once you do that, it'll bring you back to your OKTAP homepage where you can continue and perform other actions as you need. So let's say we registered that PUN and we realized, we made a mistake. We need to change it. So let's change an existing PUN. To do so, we'll go to gross production request. Again, we're going to select that form 340, register and change PUN. For those of you that have been around, that replaced the form 320A and 320C in the past. When we make that selection, we're going to identify ourselves again as a producer, but instead of using the radio button for new PUN, we're going to do change PUN. It's going to ask us for what PUN we want to do and then what information we want to change. So in this case, we're going to put in the PUN number for the well we just entered. You would have been given that PUN number after the registration was complete. And we're going to say, hey, we need to change the well info. Click next. Again, it's going to ask us to verify the mailing address. And again, you'll have the option to update that address if you need to. then it's going to ask, it'll bring us to the well info screen where we can make any changes we need to. Again, we said in this case, we're changing the exemptions. So we would click on exempt code and you'll see it already populates with the exempt code on the lease. Well, let's say we want to add another exempt code. In this case, we're going to add our federal exemption because we want it to apply to all product codes. So product code 1, 5, and 6, we're going to leave this field blank. Again, I know that's very counterintuitive. That is just how the system is currently designed. And we're going to provide the decimal exemption for that. In this case, it's 0.12345%. And it began on July 1, 2023. We click OK. You'll now see that the number of exempt codes registered is 2. We click Next, and we're brought to that electronic signature page with our scary message. We enter our first and last name, the date of our signature. We hit Submit. Again, most requests will auto-process, but it gives you that confirmation number. So if you haven't heard anything or received anything from us in 2 to 3 days, feel free to reach out to us with that confirmation number and we can figure out what's going on. Now I'd like to talk to you about the public PUN search. The public PUN search is a tool where you can look up information pretty much about all the general information about a lease. To access it, you come to the OKTAP home screen. You're not going to log in. Instead, what you're going to do is scroll down on the web page and you'll see there's a few other sections where we have help, services, corporate partnership, and fiduciary options. And where we're going to go is under the help section where it says public PUN search. We click on that link and it'll bring us to a menu where we can select different ways we want to look up one or more leases. We can search by county, in which case it'll return every PUN associated to that county. If that well is part of a merge and you have that 4-digit merge number as a unit or a reclaiming plant, you can enter that 4-digit number. If you have the PUN directly, you can just enter the PUN and it'll bring back the information. If you have the API associated with it, you can use the API. If you have a reclaimer license number, you can search for that information by license. You can do a search by lease name. This will accept partial searches. So maybe you remember the lease is called the Bass Fish, but you don't remember if it's the 1, 2, 3, or 4. If you put in Bass Fish, it will return every lease with Bass Fish in its name. Same thing with search by company number. If you have the company number who operates the lease, you just enter it there. And it'll bring you up every PUN associated with that company. Maybe you don't have the company number, but you have the company's name or a partial name. You can do a search by partial. So maybe you remember the company's name started with like cat, but you couldn't remember the full name. If you just put in cat, it will return every company and lease that has CAT in that company's name. And then if you have the legal description, you can do a search by legal. If you're not sure of what quarter, you can select leave it blank and it'll return everything, every PUN associated to that section, township, and range. For our example, we're going to go ahead and search by county. We're going to select Adair County because that's the lease we registered, and that's because that's also the county that has the least number of wells. And you'll notice it returned 3 results. The first result it returned was a PUN that has no name, and it's indicated that it's plugged and abandoned. The second one it returned, you'll notice that it says it's an OTC use lease, and that the well name is unknown source. Every single county is going to have one of these PUNs where it just has the county code and then all zeros. That's for reporting production where you don't know where it came from, which is subject to the unknown source tax of 12.5%. And then finally, there's that lease that we just registered, and that's the one we want to look at. So we'll click on that PUN hyperlink, and it's going to bring us to a page with additional details. If we clicked on the wrong PUN, we can just click back to search, and it'll take us back to our list. But what it'll do is it'll show us that PUN number, its name, its well number, its classification, the county it's located in, the county percentage, the total lease acreage, the act date, the current product codes that are active on it, if it's ceased, its current status, and any producers or purchasers, and the API number. On the next tab, it'll show us the legal description that we assigned to that lease. It has just the base legal description. If this was a horizontal hole, it would actually also show you the surface hole legal description that was entered and the bottom hole legal description that was entered. Next, if we click on exemptions, it will show us the registered exemptions. We are working on to enhance this page so that instead of just having the exempt code number, it'll also tell you actually what it is. So in this case, you know, it could say like federal or state. It shows us what the exemption applies to. Again, in this case, the exempt code 1 only applies to oil, while 2, because it's a blank, applies to everything. I know that's counterintuitive, we are working to make that a little bit more clear for everyone going forward. If you look at the qualifying tax rate, it's going to tell you what the tax rate is for the well and when that's active. If you don't know, all new wells in the state of Oklahoma are subject to a 5% tax rate for the first 36 months of its production life. After that, the tax rate increases to 7% for the remainder of the life. Now, this reads a little, does cause some confusion, so I want to point out when it says period end, that means it's no longer available in that. While the one link and OK tap system goes to the date, gross production, because everything is handled on a monthly filing, actually only looks at the month. So what this is saying is the 5% tax rate is no longer available as of July 1, 2026. So you would have to use the 7% tax rate. If this ended in the middle of the month, let's say it said July 15th, then the 7% tax rate would apply to all of July, because again, gross production operates on a month level, not a day-to-day level. Under the production history, while this lease is new, it doesn't show us any production history. It will show you a rolling 12-month list of the most recent volumes. If you need volume histories older than 12 months, we'll cover that on how to request production history here in just a little bit. And then finally, it has a tab where you can print out all this information as a printable view. It's basically all of these tabs in one giant page. So as you can see, we have the pun details. We scroll down, we have the APIs, the license, the legal description, the exemptions, and the currently non-existing production history. So as we were talking about with production history, what if you need production history beyond 12 months or you want some more detail? Well, we have a couple of different requests. First, we have a public production history request that is governed by Title 68, Section 1024, release of information. The public data that can be released to anybody, and that means any individual in the state of Oklahoma, the United States, another country, universities, anyone, we can release to them the gross volume of production, the lease's status, the lease's name, the legal description, the assigned production unit number, who the purchaser was, and who the producer was for that volume at that time. To make that request, again, you come to our OKTAP homepage, you scroll down to the help section, and just above public PUN search, there's an area that says view public reports. You'll click on view public reports and you'll be brought to a list of various reports, such as daily reports of taxes collected, deposit letters, all sorts of general public information. What you're going to want to select is PUN filing history. And when doing so, you're brought to this menu. It's going to ask you to enter the periods to, from, and to. So GP records go back as far as July of 1990. And then you'll have the option to either manually key each PUN you want history on. So if you only have 2 or 3, it might be faster to key it. But let's say you want production history on a large number of wells, like 20 wells. Well, you can import those through an Excel file. When you click on that, it'll bring you to this little selection screen where it'll ask you to choose a file. When you click on choose a file, you'll get your basic file selection. In this case, we're going to pick our pun list file. And as you can see, it's a very bare bones file. There's not even the header information. You just enter the PUNs that you want the information on and the regular format. And then when you click OK and upload the file, you'll see that they're all populated into this list for you. And you can click search. When you click search, it will return all of that public information data for you. So you can see for this PUN, for the Ryan, here is the reclaimer note. Here's the period. Here's the product code. This is how much volume was reported. Here is who produced it. Here's who purchased it. Here's the name of the producer. Here's the name of the purchaser. But you can see, because we requested so many PUNs for such large production range, we have 46 pages. That's going to be a lot to navigate through. So if you hit that export button, it will actually produce a file for you in an Excel format that has all that information, so you can sort it and organize it however you want.
Hey,
Now,
John, I have a quick question.
Yes, ma'am.
Are you able to search by producer name?
I believe that will come up as part of the regular company search. But I will double check and make sure on that. And if not, I can definitely make sure that gets added.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
So let's say you need more than the volume information. Let's say you're the actual purchaser, producer, or maybe an interest owner in the lease, and you want some confidential information. So the confidential information request is also governed by Title 68, Section 1024, Release of Information, and the confidential data that we can release to interest owners or purchasers and producers is the production unit number, the lease active status, the name, the legal description, the assigned producer and purchaser, the gross, exempt, and net volumes of production, and the taxable values of that production. We can also show the total tax remitted and reimbursed, the producing formation if we have it, and the well classification. To make a confidential request, you actually have to log into your OKTAP account. So you get to that basic screen where it has all of your licenses and accounts listed. You'll go to gross production request. From there, you'll see that PUN filing history. Click on PUN filing history. And again, it's going to look very similar to the public request. You'll enter your periods from and to. Again, it goes back as far as July of 1990. But this time it's also going to ask you to enter your email. And that's because we'll send the information, since it's confidential, directly to the email address once we've approved it. Again, the upload format is very simple. You just choose that file. It's that bare bones file with just the PUNs and all in column A, and it populates them for us. You click next, and then you're going to be asked to upload a document. And it's going to ask you to upload the interest owner affidavit form 337. This is something that is required by statute. If you don't know what that is, that's what this form looks like. It's a very bare bones form. It's just going to ask you to basically affirm that you are an interest owner or a purchaser in those leases that you're requesting information for, and that you've got to notarize. So it's basically just a positive affirmation in case we discover that there is an issue going on. To find this form, all you have to do is go to the Oklahoma Tax Commission homepage, which is at tax.ok.gov. You notice at the very top, we have this little set of menus. If you click on the Forms button right there, it'll bring you to a Forms page where we have a search bar. You can enter just a partial search and it'll return every form with that partial search. So in this case, we just put 337 and you'll notice it brought up the form 337, interest owner, purchaser affidavit. And we can download that form. And then when we go to upload, we'll fill out that form. And then we go to attach it like we would any of our other files. It's going to ask for a description of that file that we're attaching. In this case, it's the affidavit of interest. And it's going to ask us to choose the file. Again, it's the regular kind of file selection menu that you should be used to seeing on computers. In this case, it's our 337. Click open. We'll see the files attached as a PDF. When we click OK, we'll see that it's attached as submitted documentation. The name's 337. The description we gave it, the size of the file, and if we accidentally upload the wrong file, we can remove it, or we can add additional files if we need it. We hit submit, and again, you're brought to that confirmation number where you're given this number in case you haven't received any information from us within a reasonable time period. Please feel free to reach out to us and use that confirmation number as a request. Now, let's say you're an interest owner, so you're not a producer, you're not a purchaser, but you still want to get access to that confidential information that you have a right to. How would you go about doing that? Well, currently, to request confidential production history without a GP login, you can send an email to our gross production registration section. Their email is simply gross production, all one word, at tax.ok.gov. The subject line should just be production history request. List your contact information, identifying if you're requesting public or confidential information. Again, if it's confidential, you'll need to attach a copy of that form 337. List the PUNs, legal description if you have it, makes it easier for us to find. The name of the lease, if possible, it's not required, and then the starting period and the ending period for the dates you want production. And again, our records go back as far as July of 1990. That concludes our presentation. For general registration questions, here's some contact information. All general registration questions should be directed to gross production at tax.ok.gov. If you have a non-registration gross production question, then please send the email to grossproductionquestions@tax.ok.gov. That concludes my portion of this presentation. I'd be more than happy to take some questions now.
Thank you so much. Let me stop the recording. So if you guys hear anything.